Good morning, everybody, or if you're watching later on, it'll be good evening. This is Jenny-Jaymes Gunn, and this is Wired and Tired. We've brought a special guest into the Thunderdome today.
Oh, thank you.
And, well, not you, you're not special. And you're tired. But my partner in crime here, Jeff Scott, we're going to kick this off. We have a political candidate running for office, and I'm going to let him introduce himself momentarily. And we had a great show before this about MLK and leadership. But introduce yourself, Kyle.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kyle Kirby. I'm running for the 102nd District for the General Assembly. So I'd like to be your representative if you live in downtown Charlotte, Optimus Park, Country Club Heights, Plaza Midwood, Noda, Villa Heights, Windsor Park. Those are all the ones I can remember off the top of my head to name. But if I missed you, I'm sorry. I am the Republican candidate for that race, so that's a little bit unusual to have in the House today. And I'm excited to come into the Thunderdome and talk about some issues. So,
well, in the interest of full disclosure, I should say that I'm also running for NC Senate, State Senate. In District 37, which may overlap with your district.
It might, yeah.
Because you mentioned Myers Park and
well, not Myers Park. No.
Well, you mentioned
Optimus Park.
Okay.
Yeah, 102's up.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
I may be mistaken.
Charlotte,
yeah.
You're more. You're more central.
You're more down there with the rich people.
Yeah. So it's if you look at Charlotte's a ring city, right? And if you look at the lower quarter like that, that goes all the way to Matthews, Pineville.
Yeah. It's changed up a little bit since redistricting too.
Yeah.
Yes. I was not in this district up until a few weeks ago when the lines were drawn.
It was predominantly very blue, and now it's shifted quite a bit, and it's
up for grabs.
The incumbent in there right now is Jeff Jackson, which, if you're a Democrat, you probably really love him, and if you're his opponent, you're probably not going to love him so much, but it's going to be a three-way race because there is a Republican candidate in it, and then you're representing the Libertarian Party.
Right. That's right.
And then Jeff is the Democrat, and so it's going to.
But I'm the one true Jeff.
The true Jeff, the original, the hombre del pueblo, it is going to be interesting, and so we're going to talk about, and we're going to start off with a non-traditional Republican topic that actually you selected.
Yeah.
And because when we were doing the show, typically we have usually fairly progressive candidates on here, and I guess to give a backstory is a couple weeks ago, he chimed in on our feedback on our show while we were filming, and said he was a progressive Republican, and I piped up, and I'm gonna call myself out before he does. I said that's an oxymoron. That doesn't exist, and so we invited him onto the show. And then we kept constant contact with him. I ran into him on Monday night at an Equality NC event and insisted he comes on the show. And he wanted to come on the show, and the producers wanted him on the show. And
you got a lot of explaining to do.
So, right, Lucy, you've got a lot of explaining to do. And one of the topics he selected was legalization of marijuana. And we've had a show about 6-7 weeks ago about harm reduction, and which is a broader topic. And I know, Jeff, you're a member of Normal.
That's right.
And
for those that don't know what Normal is, will you tell, since you're a member of the organization?
Well, it's a national organization for the reform of marijuana laws. It's been around for, I think, 50 years, plus or minus. But traditionally, Normal started because of ostensibly the Republican war on drugs in the late 60s and early 70s. And just some general background, a lot of there aren't many Republicans that do show up to Normal meetings, but there are some, including Rivette, Nora Trotman, and I think there's a couple of others that I've been made aware of. So there are some, younger generation, not part of the Republican state orthodoxy or the national orthodoxy. But we'll let you make your own case today.
Yeah, so I'll just take it from here, and I'll say a couple things. First of all, as a Republican candidate, yes, it is a little bit unusual for me to come out right from the very beginning of my campaign and say that I'm for the legalization, regulation, and taxation of marijuana and cannabis. Why? Okay, so
now I want to do one quick clarification. You're wanting the legalization of recreational marijuana too, as well.
Not only recreational marijuana, but also marijuana to be used in medical purposes.
For pain control.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. So I've got two stories.
Right, and so that's fairly in lockstep with the libertarian position.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I believe a lot in personal liberties.
Yeah.
So you know that we can certainly talk about that later.
Sure.
But let's talk about marijuana for a moment. All right, so we spend probably millions of dollars policing marijuana. Okay, and what does that affect? That affects our black and brown communities. Okay, so if we were to move toward legalization, we would save money in policing marijuana crimes. All right, most marijuana crimes are nonviolent possession type crimes which arrive from a traffic stop. So I don't think that people should be going to jail because they have a brake light out or run a stop sign or do some other minor traffic infraction and have a small amount of marijuana on them. Next, we can get an awful lot of tax revenue from the taxation of marijuana, and the legalization of it would also kill a great deal of the black market, which is where the actual violent crimes originate from in the marijuana community. So you look at the cartels that bring it over. If we legalize it here, then we wouldn't have to rely on people going out to find this stuff from drug dealers in the neighborhoods, people bringing it across the borders, whether it be our southern border or our northern border. We've created an entirely new tax basis for the state. We've got a lot of opportunity here in North Carolina and in Charlotte to reclaim our position as a progressive leader in the Southeast. Because I can also say this, if we don't claim this issue and start making moves toward legalization and regulation and taxation, Virginia and yes, even South Carolina may beat us to the punch. And what will we be doing then? Spending even more money in police regulating the people that are coming across the borders from the states where it's already legalized. Yes, sir.
Well, I was just going to interject before you get too far.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Which is that you've already introduced several topics, one of which, right at the beginning, you talked about basically police discretion, right? Police discretion when they stop somebody. You got a tail light out. What do I smell? Let me get the dog. Gee, my deaf, dumb, and blind dog, is indicating signs that you may have an illegal substance in your car.
And that police discretion goes everywhere from, depending on the amount that's on the person, to throwing it on the side of the road and then going on to them getting arrested and going to jail.
Right, okay, so my question for you is, doesn't that really go up against basically the Republican zeitgeist in the state, which is that we need strong police. We got a kind of a high crime state. There's a lot of tension. We want our cops to have this discretionary power. Even our Democratic mayor, V. Lyles. I mean, I asked her at a public forum when she was on stage. I was sitting this far away, and that was the answer she gave. So that's even a Democrat establishment answer, but it's mostly Republican.
So
in the sense that they want police to have that kind of discretion.
So let me answer that question by saying this. If it's a discretionary matter, that means it's not an important matter. And if we are allowing our police officers to use their discretion, then why are we wasting tax money to enforce things that have a discretion behind it at all? Because when you allow for discretion, you allow for implicit bias. And when you allow for that, it does not treat everyone equal, and that's what we should be striving to do, is treat everyone equal under the Constitution. So,
damn you, that was such a perfect answer.
It's not a perfect answer.
Like a libertarian.
If you know me, you know this is how I feel on these issues.
No, I know. That is a fantastic answer. I'm gonna watch the tape.
I made you blush, didn't I?
And I'm gonna steal it. I'm gonna steal it.
He got his libertarian juices flowing there.
We're rocking here. Let's move on to the next one, which is about the taxation and stuff, because that is a craw what's the word I'm looking for? It's something that kind of when you say regulation, taxation, a lot of people recoil from that because they're thinking, you know, a lot of people normal. It's like, hey, I'm just like growing my own. Why do I need to? And sometimes I give it to my friends, and sometimes they give me theirs. So we got like just this little barter community. We don't need to deal with all that stuff.
Okay, great. So I'm growing. You said that your friend in this hypothetical scenario is growing their own. Okay, great. So let's just take this and let's turn the topic from marijuana to tobacco. Let's say I was growing tobacco in my backyard, and we are both, you know, tobacco smokers. And I said, hey, Jeff, come over to my house and let's smoke some tobacco at my house. You wouldn't do that, would you? Because you wouldn't know how that tobacco was grown, what type of pesticides and chemicals were sprayed on that tobacco, what type of soil was used in it, how it was watered, if there's heavy metals in the plants because of, you know, ignorance with how the process of growing it goes. There's all kinds of issues out there with that. And if you just let folks, which I certainly think you should be able to grow plants in your own home, you should be able to grow your own food, you should be able to raise your own livestock if you wish, but somebody in 2020 would not go over to somebody's house and smoke a cigarette from tobacco that they grew in their backyard. Somebody in 2020 that uses marijuana should not go over to somebody's house, if they choose to, go over to somebody's house and smoke something that they have no idea where it came from.
Right. So,
you know,
just from the
health issue alone.
Yeah.
But I'll interject. Sure. I mean, I know home brewers all the time that make their little mini kegs of beer, that make wine. My great uncle, that was the president of the Lutheran Church in Texas, he made his own wine.
The difference
is, and I can say with any agricultural product, your homegrown stuff versus your store-bought stuff is two different animals. And alcohol's a drug. You know, we have a thing called bars, which is a drug dispensary all over Charlotte. And
absolutely.
You can go get drugs in Chili's. It's perfectly legal as long as you're above 21 years of age. And you know, and so in the same way with marijuana, I do believe that I do like the fact that there can be dispensaries for it. I wouldn't want to prohibit people from home growth as either, you know, as long as they're not selling it, as long as they're not, you know, setting up a little cart on the corner and going,
so
like a hot dog cart.
Let me say one thing about that, because I totally agree.
And I want to interject something after this.
So a few years ago, my neighbors had a baby, and my wife made this lasagna in a casserole dish. And I was saying, oh, you know, that's not gluten-free pasta, and there's a lot of cheese in there, and they might not like the ingredients, you know. And I'm sure it was delicious, but, you know, she took it over to them, and she's just looking at me like, what are you talking about? And like I was being the stick in the mud. I was trying to rain on the parade of her just doing this gesture for the neighbors. And they got it. And they loved it. They just said, this was like the best lasagna I've had in years, you know. And so that's kind of the way I view these relationships between, you know, your neighbors. If you're going to give them the tobacco you grew or the wine that you made or your homebrew, it's really it's product as is. But if you want to go into the marketplace and you want to buy things from licensed dealers, whether tobacco companies or Constellation brands, you know, you're going to expect them to, if it's 750 milliliters on the label, then it should be 750 milliliters. If it was grown in the shade of Hawaii, you know, then it should be grown in the shade. That's right, and nobody is against that.
And I think that goes back to the roots of all prohibition. One of the reasons that prohibition usually happens is quality control. I mean, when markets get all kind of obliterated, one of the arguments against legalizing something is, how do we control it? How do we make sure it's safe? You know, there is a safety concern, which is a legitimate argument against legalization until we know we can do it. Now, Colorado's proven the model.
Yes, they have.
And Colorado, Nevada, California, and the many other states that have now legalized it and regulated it, we've not seen an increase in violence. We've not seen raging mobs going out and getting all smoked up and killing people.
This is important to point out.
And it's one of the, because they've always associated drugs like marijuana, heroin, all the drugs with violence, when they really needed to associate not with the use of drugs, but with the acquisition of drugs, the marketplace,
the black market,
marketplace that is going to do that type of thing, because nothing worthwhile usually grows in the shade. And so, you have one of these things where there's no transparency. By legalizing it and putting it up on the table, you now have at least some oversight and some safety, and especially when you're talking about medical grade marijuana and THC oils and that sort of thing. I mean, even hospitals in Israel are now using THC oil and vaping it in hospitals for pain reduction. There's so many usages for hemp products, THC, CBD, that it has become a bonanza of alternatives to some of the more harsher
pharmaceuticals,
the opioids that cause a lot of other side effects,
which is a whole nother issue.
We won't get into that today, but it has provided a fabulous deal. But you did have a point.
And what I wanted to say was, you made the comparison between homebrew and people growing marijuana on their own. Well, here's the difference. I can never recall seeing traffickers trying to traffic homebrew across state lines, across international boundaries, cartels, fighting drug wars, over homebrew. So what you do...
Well, I'm going to stop you there, because it was called Al Capone.
Prohibition, which is the same situation that we're in now. And you saw with the original, I believe it was called the Volstead Act. You saw with the original prohibition of alcohol, crime rates going up. And if we are to legalize and regulate, you will see a decrease, which is proven in Colorado, of crimes. Because, again, going back to the whole discretionary thing, we are wasting taxpayer money allowing for something to be discretionary.
Well, I'm getting really uncomfortable with this conversation, because we're all basically in agreement. Right? So if we don't find something to fight about, our ratings are just going to...
Well, you might be surprised.
So let me think of... I thought of one thing that we might disagree on this particular topic, and that is the issue of taxation. Because frequently in the past, and Jenny's certainly familiar with this whole Republican argument from the 80s and the supply side economics, Arthur Laffer, doing his little Laffer curve on a napkin, saying, if we just find the optimum level of taxation to optimize revenue for the government. So no libertarian likes to hear someone saying, we need to open this business up so we can optimize revenue for the government.
No, I understand that.
And so when you say taxation, I hope you mean that it's just going to be taxed as any other normal product. If there's a ridiculously high level of sin taxes, as there is on alcohol in the state of North Carolina,
or soda in New York,
that we would certainly not want to go to that level, but that it would be something very reasonable, and even hopefully at the same time, and we should be abolishing the ABC anyway, but that's a separate topic.
It is indeed a separate topic.
But so tell me your views on this sales point from the Republican stand.
So I am not representing the Republican Party in this matter. This is not an official stance of the Republican Party. This is what the candidate Kyle Kirby for, the 102nd district believes.
Okay.
So I want to clarify that. But you're going to be disappointed, because we agree on basically everything you said. So it should be taxed just as any other product is taxed. Cigarettes taxed, alcohol taxed. Roads, public schools, our teachers, our social infrastructures, these things do not pay for themselves. And right now we are missing on millions and millions and millions of dollars that people would gladly pay. Now, when we set up marijuana legalization as something that is going to be coming to our state, it's something that we need to be very careful about how we set up.
Yeah.
We do not need another ABC board, as you mentioned earlier. We need a group of individuals that have had experience in this industry, so coming from Nevada, Colorado, elsewhere, people that realize how this is done properly. We need to get independent business owners involved in this. We need to set up a commission to where we can take into account everyone's opinion on this matter. And then we need to proceed with caution. I'm not saying throw every drug law out the window, by no means whatsoever, because drugs do hurt people. But we also need to consider the reason that marijuana was criminalized to begin with. And it's basically because black and brown people used it around jazz bars in the 1920s and 30s, and it was a racial issue. If you've ever watched the movie Reefer Madness, it's pretty telling about the mentality of where these laws originated. And frankly, we have completely ignored the benefits that marijuana could bring to our community as a taxable revenue source. And not only that, one of the main reasons that I've decided to take up this banner is my best friend since the 5th grade was diagnosed with cancer the year that I went to law school. He was a big guy, he weighed about 300 pounds, and they said the type of cancer that you have is going to kill you in 3 years. And within 3 years, a few days to the date that he was diagnosed, which was my birthday, he died. And he died weighing about 125 pounds. And the only thing that could help my friend relieve his pain, get an appetite, help him to get his mind off of the fact that he was destined to the great beyond, was a Marinol, which was a type of cancer marijuana derivative medication, and the use of cannabis. So you mean to tell me I would a heap rather have somebody coming toward me with a joint in their hand than a beer in their hand? Or
yeah, we are in absolute sync on this.
So
you know,
one thing, and I don't mean to cut you off, but
no, go ahead.
I think we can move on from that topic because as far as we now have almost 3 million people living in incarceration right now, about a third of those are drug offenders.
Yeah.
So let's say we universally legalize marijuana. Let's say we legalize all drugs. We become Amsterdam. Then should the people being housed right now for drug use, should they be released?
Well, let me
go ahead, Jeff.
Let me just say,
Absolutely.
this was a sticking point, right, in Congress with Nadler. One of the best things that Nadler has done with I can't remember if it's the SAFE Act was the Banking Act. Was it called the MORE Act? M-O-R-E?
I think so.
Yeah. This was the sticking point between Democrats and Republicans on the committee, right? Because Nadler wanted to say, we need to deal with this. We need to deal with this problem of people who are incarcerated and their records expunged, and even providing small business type guarantees to people of color, people who may have been popped in the past, right?
Yeah.
To get into this industry, but the Republicans wouldn't have it. Now I'm not as up to date on the information lately, so I don't know where everybody stands, and I don't know the progress of that bill. I know it sort of.
I don't think it progressed at
It
all.
didn't, yeah.
I know it didn't progress to the
Yeah,
Senate.
that's right. The Senate may have just tabled it, but
Pigeonholers.
yeah. So anyway, that's just by way of preface, because I mean I know what I feel about it, and I've campaigned on this issue. I've said, going out and talking to audiences, that I feel like North Carolina's way behind.
Yes.
And I think I'm sort of talking past the sale. I'm thinking, well, it's going to happen, but there's been a whole war on drugs, and there are bodies on the field, and we need to operate in kind of a triage environment. We need to help people who've been screwed up by this, and do those things like expunge the records and get people out of jails and get them so that they don't have to struggle in the work system. Anyway,
so we have more people incarcerated in this great country of ours than I believe anywhere else in the entire world.
True.
And why is that? Because we decide to enforce laws inequitably. We have laws that, like this whole discretion thing, that allows for a choice. And when we follow the law should be pretty well clear and spelled out. You know, when it comes to this whole marijuana topic, you know, those people that you're talking about, when they leave that prison, their debt to society is paid. You know, crime and punishment. They've committed the crime. They've done the time. They've accepted their punishment. And we should welcome them back into society as members of society. Now, of course, there are certain situations in which you couldn't do that. You know, murderers, serial killers, you know, particularly heinous crimes, that sort of thing. But, you know, we are wasting an incredible amount of money on keeping people locked up that could be redirected into stopping people from going to prison in the first place. And you know where that starts? That starts with our education system, and it starts early. It starts with giving children free pre-K, allowing people to go into schools, start to learn, start to become model citizens. Our schools are meant to produce people that can participate both democratically in our societies and economically. And what we need to do is give people more of a choice about what they do with their lives, so that when they graduate from high school at 18 and they walk out, they're not going to prison at 19. You know, this is a huge issue. I mean, we have so much agreement, and it's amazing that, you know, sitting down over a pastry and a cup of coffee.
A good pastry
people,
from Manolo's. Let's just cheer Manolo's.
Absolutely, and delicious, by the way. I've
Delicious.
never had a Latino cannoli before, and boy, they are better than a regular one.
So I've got the burning question.
Yeah.
I nailed you with the big question about the bathroom bill in the first episode.
Yeah, go ahead.
But just for shits and giggles, why are you running under the Republican ticket? Because I mean, you quack like a duck, you sound like a duck, but you are running under the goose ticket. And so
No,
I'm
it's not
curious.
a goose ticket. It's a duck ticket, because two things. One, I've been a Republican all my life. Okay.
That's fair.
And if I was to change parties to win an election, that would be dishonest.
Okay.
And we have too much dishonesty in our politics. And secondly, a true Republican is a classical liberal. And what does that mean? Talking about your Libertarian Party, that means personal freedoms. That means allowing people to be and do what they want to do in their own homes. That means allowing people freedom to say what they want to say and express themselves. And that also means minimizing government oversight. So bathroom bills, telling people that they can't grow a plant in their backyard, whether I want to smoke it or not, going back to the whole growing the tobacco in their backyard. We have such an opportunity as Republicans to show people what it's like to be a classical liberal, to be someone like George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or John Adams or James Monroe. Those people that we think, you know, are so stodgy and conservative now. In their time, they were the liberals and they were the progressives. They were the people that went out and sought to forge a new country out of a wilderness, you know, and we need to take up that banner, and we need to stop considering the R or the D or the I or the L next to the person's name, and look at the candidate and look at the issues. Because when I decided that I was going to run for the 102nd District, what did I do? I went out and I talked to people in the 102nd District. And you know what the three things those people told me that were most important to them? And this is in no particular order, but education, paying our teachers more, helping our students succeed, marijuana legalization, because everybody talked about what an absolute joke it is that it is still an illegal substance. And lastly, crime and crime prevention in our district, because there are so many folks in there. I'll go back. One of the key deciding factors for me to run in, I don't know how familiar y'all are with the Noda area, but the death of Scott Brooks with Brooks Sandwich House. I've known the Brooks family all my life, and at that candlelight visual, that was such a turning point that I realized that I needed to get involved and to show people how we can, as a community, overcome differences like LaWanna Mayfield was talking about, that the elites in these parties, the higher ups, all these people tell us that you and I have to be enemies. And that's just not the case, because we wake up next to each other every single day and we're neighbors. And you know what? Chances are you and you back over there listening quietly, we probably agree on a lot more than we disagree on. And it's time to start doing country over party and looking out for my neighbors and showing love for my neighbors. And that's why my campaign motto is love your neighbor. It's not vote for Kyle. It's not, make America great. It's not any of these, catchy slogans. It's a pretty boring slogan, love your neighbor. Because that's what we've got to start doing in order to hold this country together. Because we need to start building bridges to our diverse communities, which are not getting any less diverse. And we need to start including people within our tent and stop excluding people, because you're never going to win hearts and minds by telling somebody that they're wrong.
And I wholeheartedly agree with you, because that's the center of my activism, the fact that I go in spaces that are not traditionally known as trans welcoming, as a transgender woman. I go into spaces that aren't necessarily in fact, my fellow activists, when I told them I went to a Young Republicans meeting, they looked at me like I'd been smoking crack.
Yeah, and that's what we need to overcome on both sides.
Yeah, and was it just a kumbaya moment when I first went to the group? No, I could feel the tension on their side. I've been in marketing and sales for a long time, and I could feel the first time I went, there was like this collective, wow, there's actually one of them here, and they didn't know what to do with it at first, but as they got to talking to me in the conversation, it broke down barriers. They just figured out that I'm a living, breathing human being,
Exactly.
that I'm not a caricature from a reality TV show like Caitlyn Jenner, and I think, and vice versa, you came in a very progressive space the other night in an Equality NC meeting that was in Pride's headquarters. So you were in an organization's headquarters that's progressive, and then you is a traditionally progressive group. I mean, Equality NC is only going to endorse progressive candidates. So you went into what would be considered a non-Republican space in general, because Republicans have been the standard bearer for conservatism for quite a while. And so building those bridges is necessary. Also addressing history is also necessary. And saying, because I think the biggest thing you're going to have to overcome is my thought process. He's going to say what he needs to say to get in, because he's in a fairly progressive district, and when he gets into the House, he's going to vote with the supermajority, which is Republican right now. Right. What would stop you from doing that? And have you been persistent and consistent enough in your community efforts to change people's minds that typically vote progressive, whether it's a D or the Green Party or Libertarian Party or any party where they go, I would love to vote for a Republican, but their history. Yeah. Because you're going against the grain.
Oh, yes.
I mean,
no doubt about
when you're talking about your candidacy, and you invited me to your Facebook page, and I read over it after I accepted it. I read over it, and I'm like, it's not a traditional Republican candidacy at all. Like, it's very counter to a Dan Bishop.
Yeah.
And we'll call it the prototypical. Right now,
there's someone hissing behind the camera.
The religious,
he's just cueing me.
I mean, Dan Bishop is that religious right.
Yeah.
Very conservative, very awkward candidate for somebody like me that I don't even know if I could be in the same room with the man. Because he directly affected my fellow sisters, especially.
Yeah. And he's a DOMA. He's a DOMA right-wing conservative.
And in North Carolina last year, in 2019, we led the nation in hate crime murders against the trans community. And right here in Charlotte, and I can't help but think that, and it's not just the Republican Party. It's conservative, religious conservatives in general. So
Yes.
we can't just say just the Republican Party plays a part in this. I think there's several institutions that have played a part. How do you go against the grain on that? Because when you run under the R, that's your base.
Yeah. So I'll tell you this: my base is my neighbors.
Okay.
My base is the people that live to the left, to the right, to the behind, to the front of me. My base is the people that I see going to the grocery store. Frankly, I have caught some slack from my own party about my positions, but I can also tell you, doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. And I also believe that my constituents are the people whose interests I need to represent. I do not need to represent the interest of Dan Bishop or any other Republican that does not live within the 102nd District. I believe that Charlotteans want certain things. And I'm sorry if that does not align with the traditional conservative base. I can tell you that by pandering to the traditional conservative base in the 102nd District, I will lose by 20,000 votes. There's no doubt about that. Now, what I can do going into this, knowing that that's probably the fate that I'm going to suffer regardless of what I say to you all here today and now, at least I will have gone into that and wake up on November 4th knowing that I spoke the truth, that I am personally happy to be getting out there. Because it's not so much about Republicans or Democrats. This is about the neighbors of my district, 102, and what they want and what they need. And again, I'm sorry if I don't fit within that box that you or anybody else thinks that I need to fit into, because you know what? I'm Kyle Kirby. I'm not Dan Bishop. I'm not Donald Trump. I'm Kyle Kirby, and I'm here and wanting and begging the people of 102 to let me represent them as an honest, truth-speaking person. And you know what? Like Lawana Mayfield said, that might get me in a lot of trouble, speaking the truth to power, because power does not like truth to be spoken to.
Well, and I think the love thy neighbor thing, is something that I've always advocated for. And we had a harm reduction specialist in here late last year, and I think that the harm reduction, disarming America, getting out of wars, legalization, is all one of those things that is love thy neighbor. LGBT acceptance, integration, and protection. You know, like for example, I use the National Congress. The House passed a resolution, HR 1, protecting LGBT people, the Civil Rights Bill, last year on May 17th. May 20th, it got presented to the Senate, and it sat there in committee. Mitch McConnell has buried that in a Senate committee ever since then. It's been, 7-8 months now, almost 8 months, and there's been no movement. And that's one of the things that we face is those kinds of challenges, and North Carolina definitely needs to relook at protecting people, LGBT people especially, because just from an employment standpoint, the fact that I can be fired for being gay, I can be fired for being trans.
You can be fired for anything in North Carolina.
Well, yeah, but if you have specific things, there's some things that you can't be fired for,
right.
And there's certain, even in Texas, there's a couple protected classes, but you shouldn't be fired for what you are.
Yeah.
You know, you should be fired for incompetence. Now, if I'm gay and I'm just stupid and I do a bad job, they need to can my ass. If I can't hack it at that job, if I'm not qualified to do that job, I'm not trainable enough. Like, hey, it's been great, it's been fun, but you need to go find a different gig. Totally get that. But I don't think anybody should ever be fired for who they are, whether they're, Islamic, whether they're trans.
Okay, so that's all true, right?
Yeah.
But the question is, can the legal system deal with it, right? So Libertarian Booth, we have a booth at Pride every year, and these are the discussions that we have all day long, right? About LGBT protections, what it's like in the workplace, what about, rental housing, stuff like that. You can be fired for anything, right? And if they don't like you because they are, say stereotypical Christian, and you are gay, or you've got, whatever. Unfortunately, the morality of that aside, they're going to do what they want anyway. Now, maybe
the reason might be different.
The reason might be different. I mean, you've worked long enough in the corporate world and the working world to know that this kind of stuff happens all the time. That you never know what people's motives are behind the scenes. You might not even be aware that you have a target on your back, right?
But I do have expertise in this from the fact that I've worked with corporations and done corporate and religious training in churches about normalizing LGBT people. I'll tell you what, the most successful of the top 500 companies, of the top Forbes 500 they call it, the top 100 have done the best job of LGBT integration. The same way back in the 1960s and 70s when they were integrating African Americans and people of color, they found that the most successful integration communities, companies, also happen to be the most successful ones.
Yeah, and
I think there's more of an openness, more of a teamwork deal where they're like, you know what, this is reality. We need to do this. This is the right thing, and it empowered the employees. And I think it goes back to harm reduction. Love that neighbor. I think even legalizing marijuana, for example, I think is a harm reduction measure in so many ways.
I don't think any reasonable person listening to this discussion is going to disagree with that. Right. So the question is, do we want to empower the legal system to go collect, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of pieces of email to try to build a back history about the boss that might have fired you unfairly because, the white guy got the August vacation and the black person got the July vacation or something like that? Because those are the kind of cases that are people protest against. They feel slighted, and workplaces are just. I mean, I've taken this, somewhat philosophically. It's like, look, if someone doesn't like me, as a contractor, I tell them, look, I work here at your discretion.
Right.
If you don't want me here, I'll leave. Let's not bother with all the fancy stuff.
But
I'm happy to leave.
I'm going to be the devil's advocate.
Sure,
though.
absolutely.
Why would you even want to be in a business like that?
As a cisgendered, straight white male, you have more portability than, say, a trans woman like me or a person of color that has less doors opening for them. And so when you are already empowered, both of you are. So both of my flank, I have privilege level 1 on my left and my right. So when you feel that empowered, it's a lot easier to jump ship. Let's say you built a 10-year career and then you say, oh, by the way, I'm not a he, I'm a she.
But you're living your best life.
But if I'm losing my job over it, then it's really hard to transition when I've lost my benefits, I've lost my ability to deal. I have to go and scramble while transitioning.
So let me say this,
and it's mighty privileged of two people to say that.
Okay.
And when you're in
over
under that gun, I mean, but I mean, reality though is and I'm going to say this really bluntly, you two are looking through the lens of the height of privilege. Absolute height of privilege.
Okay. And
somebody that looks different, that's visibly different, whether it's a person of color or somebody that transitioned, but is still obviously genderqueer. I don't look cis anymore. I don't have any passing ability. There is a reality. Doors shut for me.
Okay. Doors
absolutely changed for me compared to where I was before this. I can absolutely tell you that.
Okay.
And to give you an example.
So the question is, what would you do in the legal system to fix it?
Well, for one, the laws, just like locks on your house. Locks on your house keep honest people honest.
Right.
There's going to be a certain amount of pause by having civil rights things, such as for racial discrimination, all that. you got to have a certain amount of boundaries in your society.
Yes.
Like thou shalt not kill,
Right.
things like this little
societal norms.
And is it going to stop all discrimination? Absolutely not. There's always going to be that one troll that's going to say, you know what, I want to fire that queer just to test the system or whatever rocks are in their head. But there has to be a certain amount of boundaries to protect people that company now go, well, now I can be sued for that.
Yeah, I know, but you just said that the top 100 companies are going to be firing anybody that says, you know, that person's kind of...
No, that was the opposite. That was the opposite. It was the opposite. The ones that integrated the best. The ones that integrated the best are the ones that are not doing that. But that's what I said. Is when they integrated African Americans and when they integrated LGBT the last 20 years, the top 100 companies did the best job of it because they understood teamwork. But your rank and file companies and your small businesses are the ones where the battleground is.
Right. I think the top companies that are attracting the top talent are going to be hiring somewhat liberally minded people about getting along in the workplace. So this is in that sense, it's sort of I don't want to say it's purely organic, but it's happening in an organic way.
It is
somewhat
in the culture and not necessarily within the legal system. I totally agree that we need a civil suit system, right, where people can sue because of the malfeasance or pretty clear cases where they've it demonstrated this sort of hatefulness behind the scenes and stuff like that. Because if they're not fired by that company, then there should be some perhaps outside resource if human resources can't get to them. But what I resist is the further empowerment of the legal system to go in and sort of manage these complex relations.
We don't need more government. We need less government. Yeah.
Yes, and so that's the only place where Jenny and I would disagree. And then these are the discussions that we have at Pride every year.
Well, but the issue is that with any civil rights, with any civil rights movement, I mean, you put these amendments and these things in place to give a safety net to say, if you do this.
This is beyond acceptability.
We have a constitution for that very reason. We have a Bill of Rights for that reason.
Can I just interject a couple things? So first of all, you hear all the time from the Republican Party that this was founded as a Christian country. And the commandment is love thy neighbor. It's not love thy neighbor if they're a Republican, love their neighbor if they're a cisgendered, straight, white male. Not love thy neighbor if they're a trans woman, not love their neighbor if they agree with me on these issues but don't agree with me on those. We are commanded to love our neighbors by our Maker. And I do adhere to the Judeo-Christian belief system. So, that's one thing that I try to put into my life. The other thing that I wanted to address was you were talking about, what your experiences were in your life. And I just want to ask you, when you made your transition, you are now leading the best possible life that you can lead for yourself.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, if you were fired from a job because of you leading your best life, does that mean that day at 12:11 p.m. in the afternoon on January the 15th is the end of history, period, and that's the end of the story? The end is written underneath the book.
Well, that would be.
Does that mean that that's the end of it right there?
Well, I'm going to answer it this way. Yeah. I mean, if you allow me to answer.
Sure, absolutely.
The big thing is anytime that you have a setback, it's not the end.
Right.
But at the same time, when you get a blunt force trauma like that, where you are basically, I don't want to call it a hate crime because they didn't physically hurt me, but they rearranged my life. Let's say I was 10, 12, 20 years into a career with that specific company, and I had a family to support and all that, and by me leading my best life, they shut my life down because of that and made me scramble in the middle of a transition. They jeopardized my life. They put a lot of things on the line just because of their prejudice.
Yeah.
That is a problem. So,
There's
life does go on.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But in my community that has a 40+% suicide rate,
Mm-hmm.
for that very reason, because the moment we come out, our entire world changes.
Mm-hmm.
And so the last thing we need is to worry about our employment.
Mm-hmm.
We need society to understand that it's unacceptable. Just like it would be unacceptable to fire someone because they're black.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
But you're essentially saying that you wanted a form of tenure in your job, and that you would you have transitioned had you known that you would not get tenure, that they would change their behavior toward you had you not had a
I'm not following it.
Well,
I'm not tracking the question.
so employment. A lot of people in France, for example, I heard this from a guy who taught law in France. He talked about employment law and people getting fired, and a lot of the French students were thinking, "What do you mean getting fired?" You know, so there's this concept that in several places around the world that once you're in a job, you got a certain form of tenure,
right.
and I certainly kind of thought that when I was working for many years for a large bank who will remain unnamed, Wells Fargo, but it was surprising to me, you know, that once the shit hit the fan, right, and things were going south in 2007 and 8, that all of a sudden everybody who thought they had, you know, good relations with their coworkers and you know, things were going just fine, as soon as the big guns came out, and it was just a bloodbath. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. It was pretty horrible.
But you are talking about two different things.
I'm talking about the expectation of tenure. Like, you didn't have an agreement with them. You might have gotten along with them pretty well, but there's nothing either implied in the contract or very explicit in the contract.
But I'm going to pump your brakes from the fact that I did not say that I deserve tenure. There's a huge difference between the expectation of longevity of career and getting punched in the face because I came out. There's a huge difference. Right. One, like I said, if I'm grossly incompetent and it has nothing to do with my transition, like I'm just a screw up. You know, I'm late every day. I go into my boss's office and take a dump on his desk, whatever it is, you know.
We've all been there.
Yeah, I mean, sitting there in the corner office biting in my own ear, But then in an economic downturn, you know, there's a huge difference between, you know, the economy tanking or the company tanking, and me coming in and going, well, I was James, now I'm Jenny, and you go, we can't live with that. You know, there's a huge difference between that. That's not an expectation of tenure. I'm gonna take issue with that.
It's an expectation of acceptance of who you are.
An affirmation, because as somebody that earned that spot, let's say I was a good employee and I continue to be a good employee and I maintain my level of production. And then they said, well, we're going to get rid of you because of production, and it wasn't true, and they really got rid of me because they were uncomfortable with me being trans.
And that's exactly the way they do it. I agree,
I mean, there's a huge difference between that.
They don't tell you
you'll never be able to know what they really got rid of you for.
No.
But you can assume that that's why.
But with all civil rights bills, the deal is to pump the brakes on the tide of cruelty and a very powerful few deciding who gets basic human rights and who doesn't. And the thing is, you could say that about all the protections for African Americans, about any intersection in our society. You could say that same thing. Well, you know, they could get rid of you for anything. Well, that doesn't give us permission to not put in certain basic protections, basic human rights protections. It will pump the brakes on a lot of people where they'll think twice about it, and that's all we want is pause. The same way why we have murder laws. If that was true, if laws didn't matter and the basic human natures are going to do what they want, then why do we have laws about thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal? We should have no laws at all. We should have no judicial system, and we should just all And we should have anarchy then, and we shouldn't have any barriers whatsoever, and just say everybody's going to be a good person. That's going to be a good person. Whoever's a bad person is going to be a bad person, and we get rid of all laws, get rid of all courts.
So I think that it's
survival of the fittest.
I think that it's important to remember that we are all human beings, regardless of what orientation, what skin color, what genitalia you have. We're all human beings, right? So human beings are inevitably flawed, and we cannot help that people feel and act a certain way. Now, as long as you know that you're living your life to its fullest potential, that's all we can hope for. We can legislate into the laws protections, but that doesn't stop anybody from going around those protections and achieving the same goal that they wanted to for nefarious reasons to begin with.
But it slows them down.
It slows them down.
It's funny when the person that has the privilege says that versus the people that have less privilege, like myself. And I find it consistent when you have privilege level 1, which you both are. Okay. To say that to somebody that does not have the same privileges.
So privilege level 1 has to stop. Because I'm not a homeowner, I'm a renter. I struggle with paying my bills. My wife's a school teacher. We struggle with living in Charlotte. Just because you're a white straight male does not mean that you have none of the issues that other people suffer with. So you can't just say
you accepted more than an American Express card. I mean, come on.
You can't just say that I live a fantastic, wonderful, carefree life because of innate privilege. That's just that argument in and of itself is, in my opinion, very flawed. Because you see this on the outside.
Correct.
The same way everybody sees this on the outside, the same way everybody sees this on the outside. So we need to look beyond that, and we need to see what we are as human beings. Martin Luther King Day, judge not on the person's appearance, but of their character.
I agree with that.
Truly, we're never going to have a perfect society, as much as it hurts me to say. Yeah. We're never going to have that society in which everybody is treated equally no matter what. That is a rabbit trail that maybe one day in paradise we will all achieve that. But in the meantime, we've got to realize history does not end today and now. There is room for progress. There is room for improvement. There is room for us to see one another as human beings and not, under a banner or a stereotype. That is one of the hardest things that we have got to overcome as a society, is this stereotype. Because you look a certain way, doesn't mean that you are automatically that way or that person.
And I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree with most of it. The only thing is that you can still have a tough road to hoe.
Yeah.
I mean, as a white man,
there's plenty of people that I know that are white people that are born into drug addicted, single family, on welfare, struggling every day that they get up, and then on top of that, they might have LGBTQ plus issues. They might be struggling with other issues that we don't even know about.
I do agree with that.
You just can't say you're the devil because of the color of your skin or your sexual orientation, because that's just going against the grain of what fundamentally you try to stand for.
Well, no, because what I am pointing out is the disparity between us two, and that there is some real acknowledgement of that. And for you to be able to understand my journey, you have to understand in society, in the pecking order, that there is a pecking order. That it's not just...
But this is not a caste society. Well, you are free to move in between. Yeah, and the big barrier is an economic barrier.
Yeah, and when you go on to interviews like I did in 2017 in Amarillo, Texas, I went on 19 interviews. I got one job offer.
You know what I would say, though? I would say that is not typical of just your situation. I know people that apply for multiple jobs and don't get it. And it doesn't matter if you visibly see the person or just read the...
No, these were 19 in-person interviews.
Okay.
One job offer, and now I'm going to back it up. pre-2016, before I transitioned,
Mm-hmm.
I would say 90% of the time I got a job offer within 10 minutes of the interview.
Okay.
I never had a job in my marketing and sales career where I did not get promoted in 20 years.
Okay,
So
so
there's
that's
a huge
personal
difference.
expectation.
That's a huge
that's
difference.
a personal expectation. But what I'm saying is,
No, you can't erase what I just said by diverting the conversation.
I'm
There
not
is a
diverting the
real
conversation.
there is a
You have
real
an
change.
expectation to be hired no matter what and be promoted no matter what.
Right, I'm the
So
same
I
person.
guess that is your white male privilege, quote, shining through with that expectation of no matter what, I'm going to be hired. No matter what, I'm going to be promoted. I know many, many, many people that apply for many, many jobs and do not get those jobs. So, while that experience might be unique to you of the visual across the table and then
Right.
discriminating you based off of the way you look,
Right.
it is not typical, or it is atypical situation of people. There are many people that apply for jobs and are not accepted for numerous reasons.
Yeah, but
I'm just wanting you to
I'm not-
acknowledge that as well.
Yeah, I do
Okay.
acknowledge that, but also, one, I'm very talented at what
Mhm.
I do. Two, I have a hell of a resume.
Mm-hmm.
And three, the change of the disparity between me applying for the same types of jobs and not getting even a sniff
Mm-hmm.
is a huge difference, and it was because of my physical change.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very big change when I sat in offices and interviewed as a white male
Mm-hmm.
and different when I was a woman. And when you're presenting as a woman, for one, I got patronizing things said to me in interviews that I never heard as a male.
Mm-hmm.
Three, being visibly queer, I could see the body language. I've gone to enough sales training classes and I have enough lived experience. I can tell when somebody's uneasy with me. And when I went in and interviewed as a white male, I never ran into that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is one of the reasons I say what I say, is that when you are visibly different
Mm-hmm.
and you're not the what I was, if I can see that duality of life,
Right.
and see it under two different lenses and get two different results,
Mm-hmm.
it exists. And
Not saying it doesn't exist.
Yeah, no one's arguing
Yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah.
exist. We're just arguing about what we think the legal remedies should be, and
Oh, absolutely.
whether or not the civil rights movement, which was really in the wake of America's slave society,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
how
Reconstruction.
how we
Brutal.
deal retroactively with that and the implications through the rest of society, whether that also includes forms of repair or reparation or remuneration for women, gays and lesbians, trans people. This is all just over the last 20 or 30 years that these things have come to the fore.
absolutely.
So from a legislative perspective, I would think that this is a debate that has to happen in state houses, it has to happen in the Congress,
Yeah.
but it can't be made behind the scenes in administrative law with attorneys that are, the legal professions that are benefiting from creating laws where they can go after big fish.
Yeah,
So,
so there's a
so-
difference.
yeah.
There's a difference between being opportunists and all that. We are at our final moments,
Mm-hmm.
so I want to get a last thought from you.
You go ahead now.
Yeah, go for it.
So, just some final thoughts in regard to all this. I think we're all pretty much on the same page about the stupidity of the continuation of the illegality of marijuana. The second thing is I want to reiterate that, under our Constitution and under our laws, all people are equal, and that's what we should be striving for. And regardless of the many stereotypes that we have in our own implicit bias as a cisgender, as an LGBTQ member, as whatever, we need to try to overcome those issues, because in the end, no matter what, we're all still human beings, and we can find some commonality in our life experiences. And I just want to say thank y'all for having me on this show.
Definitely.
This has been a super fun time. I thought we were about 15 minutes into it. Apparently we're over time. So again, We appreciate you. We appreciate all y'all do. Jeff,
Thank
both
you.
of y'all.
Jeff?
This is wonderful.
Well, my final thoughts, let me quote from Nassim Taleb, who said, at the federal level, I am a libertarian. At the state level, I am a Republican. At the local level, I am a Democrat. And in my home, I'm a socialist. And I think that's really food for thought about how we can all sort of align about the important things that are important in our homes, with our families and our neighbors. And at the state level, you know, Republicans, the representative form of government, is a good form of government to debate critical issues, and then keep our federal government small, limited, classically liberal. Don't go searching for monsters abroad. We didn't talk about Iran at all, but maybe we can do that. Let's talk about that next time.
Well, and I'm gonna wrap up with the last thought. It's always good to meet our neighbors and meet new neighbors, and you know, building bridges is a central theme of my activism, a central theme of the show. Honestly, I mean, on that note, make sure the primaries are coming up. Get involved.
March 3rd.
You know, getting people registered to vote. You know, whatever it takes to get involved. And I'm against drug prohibition of all kinds. I think there's a better way. I think if it's a medical issue, let's make it a medical issue, not an incarceration issue. We shouldn't have big private companies incarcerating people. That goes against the grain of democracy. Vote early, vote often. Love you guys.
Oh, so our next show is going to be on February 5th. We don't have a guest lined up at this point, but there's a lot of things happening at the federal level. War, for example, the Iran tensions. We weren't able to talk about that today, but
probably still boiling
it
on
will
February 5th.
It will be hot boiling.
That issue's cooling off. Trust me.
Not gonna do it. Goodbye.